Hey, it's really good to be here. This is my first time here at the Forge, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited because partly I've been able to spend the last couple of days here in Southern Ontario, and I grew up, I was one of those people who grew up all over the place. My parents were missionaries in Nicaragua. When I was 3, we got evacuated from Nicaragua, and if you ever want to hear a fun story, that's the one in my life where we were evacuated by the U.S. military in a Hercules, and it was a cool story. Maybe I should tell that instead, hey? That's probably more exciting than what else I have prepped. But for me, my parents were pastors, and they ended up moving to Southern Ontario when I was between grade 7 and grade 8. And so this kind of feels like coming home to a place that I remember. It's interesting driving. I drove in from London today, and it said I should just kind of just stay on the north part of St. Thomas. And I was like, no, I have to go I came a little early, went through a drive down, the main drag, and was just kind of like, oh yeah, I remember, yeah, yeah, that's right, yeah, it was just kind of cool. And so for me, being here is kind of like coming back home, not necessarily here, but my parents they pastored in Mount Salem, and they pastored at St. Thomas. I think it's called Gospel Fellowship now. It's called Redemption or something. But back when it was still an EMMC church, that's where they are. Do you know the name of your parents? Wilbert and Hilda Friesen. If you know Wilbert and Hilda Friesen? Yeah, there you go. Now you know where I come from. We've played the game, so we all know where to go. I started working at EMC in the last about 9 or 10 months. I started in January, and one of the things when I started, they kind of let me know what my job was, and my title is Director of Next Generation. And I look at that and it's just kind of like, wow, that seems like this huge thing. And the idea is that they really want me to be a support to churches, helping them to understand what it looks like to do ministry to the next generation and with the next generation. And so I look and I'm like, I'm super pumped that there's a Youth for Christ person here, because I worked at Youth for Christ in Manitoba for about 6 years, and I still have lots of good friends who are with YFC. You're going to love that experience in Amsterdam. It's going to be so cool. And so for me, my ministry stuff started with the idea of working with Youth for Christ. And I got that beautiful picture of what it looks like to work with students that are kind of falling through the cracks, the ones who we need to find that hope and potential. Did I use all the right words, the Youth for Christ words? And so for me, that was exciting. And then I spent some time being about 20 years being an associate pastor, where I worked with youth and music, and that's kind of where I come from. And I started this job in January, and one of the things that I've been excited about being able to do is adults, young youth, and children. And so as I look at this, it's one of those things where I'm trying to encourage us as congregations to realize that what we're doing is actually missions work. When we think of working with youth and young adults, a lot of what we're doing is looking at a culture and saying, how can we reach this culture? It's easy to think about doing that, if we go to Mexico or Bolivia or Paraguay or anywhere else in the world, but actually it's one of those things that we get to do right here. And so I'm excited about being able to share some of the thoughts and different ideas. And basically what I want to do is I want to give us a little bit of a biblical support of why we should be concerned about the next generations that are coming up, and why we should care for them. And then after that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you 9 quick tips. And I know 9, I'm sorry, that's a big number for a Sunday morning, but I promise they won't be 45 minutes each, not at all. And so what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to... Yeah, 3 points. I know my dad.
That's 3 groups of 3.
My dad always had 3 points, a poem, and a prayer. That's how you do. But so I'm really messing with that, and I'm sorry. That's how it goes. Deuteronomy, which the section that was just read in chapter 6, verses 5 to 9. starts off by saying, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. That's the part that I wanted to pull out of there. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road and when you're going to bed and when you're going to get up. Tie them around your hands and wear them on your forehead as a reminder. I still haven't gotten good at wearing Christ's commands on my forehead. I'm not quite there yet. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And one of the things that I wanted us to think about when we think about this passage is that the starting point for all of our ministry and the opportunity that we have to work with any of us and grow in any ways and to do any kind of ministry is to understand that the starting point for all of it is God's love. That's the place where it all starts. If we're not starting from that spot, we're missing it. We're just doing really cool kids clubs. But we start with this idea that it's God's love. The other thing is that repetition is important. It's one of those things when we look at the Psalms, like there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of stuff that's going on over and over and over again. And I think for us, like just the fact that you were reading that scripture passage together every Sunday this month, that repetition, it's that repetition that keeps reminding us. And then the other thing is that it's not about going and doing like a single program. It's about the idea that we are supposed to be doing all of this work as we are going. It says, as you're walking down the road, when you're at home, when you're going to bed, when you're getting up in the morning, whatever you're doing, we got to be doing this at all times. And so if we think of ministry, that's kind of the thing that I'd like to do. The second passage that I wanted to look at was Titus chapter 2, verses 3 to 8. And we're not going to get into a lot of the stuff that it says there, but there is this picture in that section that talks about older women living in a way that honors God so that they can teach the younger women what it looks like to live honorable lives. And it says, in the same way, encourage the younger men to live wisely and to encourage and so they can be an encouragement and so that the older men can teach them what it looks like to follow Christ as well. And so there's this idea that older and younger need to be working together and that older has an opportunity to come alongside the younger and to be able to help them understand what it looks like to follow God. And it says that we're supposed to honor God with our lives. We're supposed to model Christ's likeness to the younger generations. We're supposed to keep our integrity and be able to hold on to that with something like so that they are able to see the way that we hold on to our faith so that it can be an example not only to the younger people who are coming up, but also to the world around us. So those are those passages that we're working on. So here we go. Here's some tips, 9 of them, so you can keep track and then you can keep score at the end, if I got them right. Choose your favorite one. The first one is this. In order for us to do healthy ministry to next generations, we need to prioritize healthy ministry for all generations. It's easy for us to, for those of us who are in the youth ministry world, to be like, this is the only focus. Like, this is it. We got to focus on youth. We got to make sure that everything is youth friendly. Everything is youth. Everything is youth, kids, youth, kids. The reality is that if that's all that we do, we're not providing and finding a way to ensure that all generations are growing in their love for Christ. And so we need to make sure that the grandmas and grandpas in our congregation are growing in their love for Christ. And it's not just about maintaining. We need to make sure that those of us who are kind of in the middle-age years are finding ways to learn new things about who God is. We need to make sure that the young families, the parents are having opportunities to connect with Jesus in significant ways. And we need to make sure that every age group is doing that so that we can be healthy as a body of believers. And sometimes I think we think that we should just expect that the older folks are just going to be able to learn on their own. And so here's my encouragement to us. If we're thinking about trying to be a really great church that reaches out to the next generations, realize that we also need to make sure that we're reaching out and we're supporting those who are at all stages of their life. Okay, the second one. See, that wasn't so long. Number 2, create multi-generational interactions. I'll be honest. I grew up in a church that was maybe a little bit bigger than this for kind of my elementary school years. I love small church. The reason I love small church is because there is this family kind of feel to what happens. Growing up as a kid, I knew all of the adults in our church, and they would come and they knew stuff about me. Sometimes when we get into larger church situations, it's really easy for us to start to make silos of all the different age groups and kind of be like, okay, well, here's the preschool kids, and here's the elementary kids, and here's the and I found out here you guys don't do middle school, apparently. It's elementary school and then high school. So I always say, but it's like the junior high or the junior youth kids and the senior youth kids and the young adults and then the young marrieds and make sure that they never really interact. And I think that's an issue and a concern for me, because what ends up happening is it's really easy for us to have our only experience with God being with people who think exactly the same way that we do. And so I think there's this really awesome thing that happens in churches when multiple generations come together and they actually start to mix and they actually start to take time together. We make sure that there's opportunities for all ages to have fun together, to serve together, and to learn together. And I think that fun together is actually a significant part of our spiritual development. Those opportunities to be able to just play games together or to do something that's interesting together. There's some great memories that I have of playing baseball with my church in southern Manitoba, because that's what we did on Sunday afternoons. We got together and we played baseball because there was nothing else to do where we lived. But we played as soon as you were like 10 years old, then you could play with the adults. And it was just like this awesome thing that first time that you could actually play with the adults. And it was just like, yeah. And there were guys that were just like really good. And yet then you would be just terrible as a young little kid. But it was like this opportunity to just be a part of it. And that's something that's really significant, as well as serving together. The opportunity to be able to go on to do some kind of a mission, some kind of a service thing together with people who are older than you, to be able to work alongside where you're in a lot of ways are equals, is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Here's the thing that I want to encourage us with. A lot of times we expect that the young people are going to be the ones who are going to initiate those multi-generational things. And I want to say to us who are adults, I think we need to take responsibility, inviting them into saying, hey, you guys want to do this with us? Instead of saying, hey, you know what, youth group, you should go and do those things, or kids, you should go and do that. Number 3, did I get the right one? 3, here we go. Make safety a high priority. It used to be, probably when I grew up and when those who are a little bit older like I am grew up, that the church in general was seen as a trusted place to send kids. It was just part of the community, understood that, oh, you're going to church? Wow, perfect. Just send them off. They didn't even think about it. Unfortunately, in the culture that we live in, unfortunately in the history that we are part of as part of the wider church, there's been enough failure and there's been enough situations that I don't think that is the case any longer. I don't think that, for the most part, our culture sees church as a safe place to send kids. As a result, I think it is really, really important that we do whatever we can to ensure that there's proper policies, there's proper due diligence, there's safeguards that are put in place so that we can make sure that the ministries that we're doing are safe. And sometimes it's easy to kind of feel like, well, those things are limiting us, our ability to do ministry. But I'll tell you, a situation where there's a significant failure does way more harm than the limit of our ministry that we're being limited because of because of the policies that we're following. Communicate those safety measures to the people who are entrusting their children to you. So if you're doing a VBS thing or you're doing some kind of an outreach thing, make sure that the parents know what the precautions you guys are taking. Make sure they know that you've kind of done your due diligence with the volunteers who are there. This can be our greatest or worst witness in the community. And I think that if we want to reach the next generation and show them the love of God, we need to work really hard at providing a place of safety. Okay, this one's one of my favorites. Reverse the ratio. A couple of years ago, there was a book that came out by Fuller Youth Institute called Sticky Faith. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that. But in that book, they talk about the fact that they had done like a pile of research across United States and actually most of North America. And they were looking for the magic bullet as to how they can get young adults to stay in church after high school. And they were looking for this magic bullet. Like they wanted to know, like, what's the one thing that we can do? And if we do this, we're going to have success. And they didn't find one. But they found a number of different things that they felt like those people who ended up staying in church after high school, there were things that were in common. And one of the things that they suggested in how to build in those that kind of sticky faith, where faith would stick beyond high school, one of the things that they said here was the idea of reversing the ratio. A lot of times within youth ministry, we've thought of make sure you have at least one leader for every 5 students. That's a good, safe ratio, and we can make sure that we can stay connected and those kinds of things. And what they were saying is that we need to actually flip that on its head. And so we need to look and we need to say, for every student that's involved in our church and is involved in our community of faith, we need to have 5 adults that are connecting with them in a significant way. 5 adults that know something about who they are, 5 adults that take interest in their lives, 5 adults that invest in their spiritual well-being. And that sounds like, in some ways, that sounds like a big deal, right? Well, 5 people, like that's a lot of. But what a beautiful thing for a student to walk into the church and to be able to recognize and say, hey, these 5 people are people that actually take time for me. And it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't mean that you need to have 5 Sunday school teachers for every student. But we need to see ourselves as an opportunity to invest in the lives of young people. And here's a couple of ideas of how to do that. When you have small children, there is something different between talking down to them like this or getting down onto their level and just actually talking to them face to face. Interact with students on their level and get down and actually acknowledge who they are. Ask them about their life. Okay, ask them about something that's going on in their life. And when you do that, try really hard to remember that. There was a story of a lady who worked as a greeter in a church. It was this huge church. And when people would come, she would ask them about different things about their family. And she would go, the next Sunday, and it was actually a friend of mine who walked into this church, and this lady came up and asked all these questions, and he's like you're going to remember any of this, right? And the next Sunday, they walked in again, and they had been visitors into this church, and she was like, hey, and she remembered the family's name, and she remembered the kids' names, and she remembered some of the stuff that they had talked about. How is this going? And so and then they talked about the next Sunday it happened again. She just kept coming back and asking about this. And this friend of mine was like she's doing this with a lot of people. Like, how in the world is she remembering this? Like, this is like what's going on? And so they finally said, I think, I don't know what her name was. Let's call her Dolores. I'm not sure. How is Dolores remembering all of this? And he goes, oh, she's been doing this for a long time. She'll go back, I don't know if you've noticed that, but she has that little notebook in her back pocket. And when she meets new people, she pulls that out and she quickly writes down the information that they share just so that she can remember that. And then before church, she goes through that list of stuff to make sure that she can remember all those people. And then when she does it, she tries to do that. He said, that was the reason we went back to that church. because she remembered what we were about. And she remembered our kids. And our kids knew her and felt like they were seen by her. Get down on their level, ask them about their life, remember what they told you, and ask them about it again the next week. And then model faith in real life. That's one of the great things that we have the opportunity to do. Be people who get down. And that's why I love small church, because it's not hard, I don't think, in small church to recognize the kids, and two, for the kids to recognize you. And there's this family feel about being able to come together. Okay, next one. Number 5, give opportunities to serve alongside adults. Bring young people into the ministry with you. Don't just assign them the unpleasant jobs. I remember being a youth pastor, and it was often like the leadership would be like, we're having a big our Thanksgiving supper. Maybe we can just get the youth. Maybe the youth just want to set up all the tables and chairs, right? And I would look and be like, oh, okay, yeah, we can do it, But I'll tell you, it makes a big difference when those leadership people say to a couple of young men and women in our church and say, young kids, hey, do you guys want to come and help us set up tables and chairs? We're going to do that with you. It's not like we're just giving you the menial stuff and letting you take care of it, but we actually want to involve you in what's going on. So let's give opportunity to serve alongside adults. Don't just assign them the unpleasant jobs, but actually give them opportunity to share and to serve in real and significant ways. Whether that's even just the idea of potentially bringing them into like a leader in training, or when they get a little bit older, bring them on stage and allow them to sing along, even if they don't have a microphone at first, right? Make sure that if students find something that they love, like find a way to give them the opportunity to serve. Number 6, hand off appropriate responsibilities quickly. There's a guy named Brady Shearer, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but he does a lot of sort of tech and church administration kind of stuff. And he posted something a little while ago, and it said this. It said, "You want to know how to develop young leaders?" He says this, and he was talking about developing talent. He said, step 1, confidence breeds competence. So he said he's a guy who does like videography and stuff for his church and runs all their tech in a fairly large church. And he said, I would not be doing what I'm doing except for the fact that one of our pastors came, handed me a video camera and said, hey, I want you to make a video. Recognized that maybe he had some interest in it, handed him a camera and said, make us a video about this. And he said that video was terrible. But I developed a love for that, and I was given an opportunity to serve. And so he said that first, the idea is that confidence, his pastor showing confidence in him and saying, hey, I think you can do this, actually bred in him the idea that there was some competence that was there. The second step was greater competence breeds greater confidence. Okay, so once you start getting better and better at what you're doing, you grow in your confidence. And then step 3 is repeat forever. Often what we want is people to be really good at what they do before we give them an opportunity to serve, right? And what this is suggesting is that actually sometimes we need to show them the confidence even as they're developing the competence in what they do. Number 7. See, we're going through this pretty quick. Now we get to something that I think is really important as well. Teach the Bible in relationship. It's not just about, so far we've done a lot about relationships and a lot about doing things together. And it's important that we remember that all of the things that we do are in relationship. But we also have to understand that we need to teach the Bible, and we need to point people to Jesus. If we're not doing that, we're doing really great we're doing a really great clubs program, right? Like we're doing good community outreach, but we're not really doing something that's going to make a significant impact in the long-term health of people, in their growth as followers of Jesus. So we need to find ways to teach the Bible very clearly but to do that in a relationship. My Sunday school teacher, when I was growing up in a small little church, he said to us, I want you guys to memorize verses. And whoever memorizes the most verses between now and the end of October there's gonna be a prize. And I was like motivated quite strongly by prizes in my life. And so for me, I was like, I got this, sweet. And so I memorized a lot of verses, and a friend of mine memorized a lot of verses, and he chose the top male and the top female, and there were 3 of us in the class, and so 2 of us won. I don't know why he didn't just do all 3 of us, but it's how it goes. And he could have just given us something, right? He could have taken and just given us a thing. But what he did was he actually said, I'm going to take you guys to, and I'll be honest, I'm a bit of a CFL football fan. I know that's not popular necessarily in Southern Ontario, but I am. It's kind of a Western Canada kind of thing, I think. And he took me to my first Winnipeg Blue Bombers game. It was the end of October in Winnipeg, which was not pleasant. But he took us to that game and spent the entire day with us. And it was just like, it's one of those memories that I'll remember because he actually took time. It was just him and the 2 of us. We sat down. I remember it being so incredibly cold that he took us down. He bought us hot chocolate because we were just freezing. And it was kind of rainy and drizzly and almost snowing. And like, it was terrible weather. And I know we played the Hamilton Ticats that day, and I know that we won that day. I remember all of that stuff. And then I remember that he took us to Boston Pizza. Yeah, Boston Pizza was around back then. And I remember what kind of pizza we had. We had like the Boston Special or something, the one that had shrimp on it. And I was like weirded out because I'd never had shrimp in my life before. And I was like, there's shrimp. And he's like, yeah. And I didn't want to be rude and say like, I've never had this stuff before. And I was like, oh. After that, I said to my mom, oh, shrimp is awesome. And I didn't realize that like shrimp was more than just those little tiny little baby shrimp. Like it was like, sometimes they're kind of whatever. I didn't realize that I didn't necessarily like shrimp, but I was sort of put up with it. But I had this experience, right, where this guy came and invested time, and we spent like hours together as a prize for doing something as far as my walk with Jesus was concerned. And so for me, I look at that and I see he taught me something. There's verses that I remember because of that time. But it also came with relationship. And I think for me, that's something that was really significant. And it's something that I think that we can work on as well. Number 8, nearing the end, support parents. Parenting doesn't come with an owner's manual. Well, maybe it did with you guys, I don't know, but it sure didn't with us. There's a lot of things that as a young parent we had to learn. And parents now have more information than ever, but I think in a lot of ways it's actually becoming, the more information you have, it almost makes it more difficult because we have to somehow sift through all the information to find the good stuff. Parents need to know that they're supported and cared for. If we want to have an impact on the lives of students, care for their parents. Make sure that supporting parents is a priority. Think of ideas of how you can engage the parents that are in as part of your community, the people who are around us. What does it look like for us to actually support the parents? Often when we support the parents, the kids are often coming into ministry. Now we have the opportunity to not only affect that generation, but we have the opportunity to invite and affect the generation that's above them as well. So supporting the parents, I think, is a significant part of reaching and doing ministry to the next generation. Last one. When I first started at this position, I found it, especially this summer, when we were at festival, our EMC festival, and we were meeting together, and there was a lot of people that would come up to me after I was introduced as next generation person, and they would come up and they'd be like, I'm so glad that there's somebody who's working with next generation. And it was like, and I knew exactly where the conversation was going to go right after this. And it was like, because I've never had It's never been so hard to be a young person anymore, as it is right now. And then it'd be like, we would start talking about all the cultural and significant moral situations that were going on. And then we would talk about, how the government is failing, and we would talk about how everything just seems to be piling up, and how, the world doesn't value Christianity anymore. And usually, like, it was like this whole thing, like there was always a part of that conversation. And I remember feeling like somehow we need to reverse that conversation. We need to actually look for the hope. Like, hope needs to be the answer that we're choosing to give when we think about the generations that are to come. And I'm not saying that we should put our heads in the sand and not realize the stuff that's going on. There's a lot of stuff that young people are having to go through. And I remember someone saying to me, it's the hardest it's ever been to be a young person. And I said, I grew up, like, my grandparents didn't have running water. And we went to visit them, and we had to use an outhouse. I dated before internet, and we were gone away for, like, in different provinces for 4 months. We couldn't even email. Like, I don't think this is the hardest it's ever been. But in a lot of ways, there are different things that are the concerns. We need to find the ways that we can have hope. And I wrote an article. If you're interested in reading the article that I wrote, you can go to our EMC website and look at the messenger. There's an article that's on there about hope and why I have hope for the next generation. Jesus said that he will build his church. I think sometimes we get caught up in this idea that somehow we have to build his church. But understand that Jesus is the one who is doing the work of transformation. He will not let his church die. We need to come along and join in that wonderful story. There is so much that is going on. There are ways that the gospel is being told to a generation like has never been done before. I look at the younger people who are coming up, and while I'm fully in the Gen X kind of world, right? Like, I grew up with one foot in, like, the technology, or in the old timer kind of camp where we were, like, tech free, and the other side where I've been, I grew up also, like, we were the first ones to kind of start using computers in our work, right? Like, that was kind of my generation. And so I have struggled all through youth ministry trying to figure out how to balance these two ideas. And I look at the young people who are coming up, who have grown up sort of in this world. There's some of the stuff that they can figure out and that they can step into like so much better than what I can. I'm so excited for the creativity and the opportunity that's going to come. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to listen or to step into, when we look at the younger generations, with this idea that we live in a scarcity model, right? Like, where God somehow isn't enough for this. But actually, we live in a place where God's abundance is enough for all of it. God has given us everything that we need for life and godliness. He's given us everything that we need to join his story and to continue the work. There is so much reason for us to be encouraged, and share those encouragements with the younger people. When you see younger people in your congregation, don't just say, I'm so sorry that you have to go through all these rough things, but rather look at them and also say, you know what, I'm so excited for what Jesus is going to be doing through your generation. Because I think that's a message that we can share. And as we share that, as we notice things, right? If you notice that there's a young person that's doing something awesome for Christ, make sure that you recognize that in them and tell them about it so that they can be excited about what it is that they can be a part of. Share those encouragements with the younger generation and show that you believe that God is at work in them. Make sure that we communicate hope. Don't make endless stereotypes saying, this whole generation doesn't like to work. That's not true. There's some of us that, even who are older, that don't like to work. Offer hope in difficult situations, and let's be patient, because it's God's time. God is going to be the one who's going to come through for us. it's interesting realizing that often we want to see change in generations right now. I worked with when I first started, this is my last story, so now I can say, I'll only say it once, this is it. I had a couple that had just kind of started dating. Actually before, they weren't even dating when I got to know them. They started our youth group at grade 7. They were going through some pretty crazy stuff in both of their lives. And as they started dating together, during that time, her parents divorced. It was a pretty ugly situation. Her dad was an alcoholic, and it made for a really difficult situation for them. And the boyfriend was trying to figure out how to be a support to his girlfriend, and he was pretty protective. And so, in his mind, what he would just like to do is go beat up the father. And I said, no, that's probably not a great idea. But we did, they walked through this. We watched them take steps of faith slowly as they started moving forward. And they ended up getting married. Karen and I, my wife, got to do their premarital counseling. They grew in their faith, and it was kind of messy for a while. And they were continuing to serve in different ways and getting connected, and they served as youth leaders for a bit, and it was pretty exciting. And then I remember that day this guy got to share his faith with another student at Abundant Springs, our big youth event. And I have this clear picture of him sitting in this giant sanctuary with his arm around a guy, just praying with him. I remember seeing that and just thinking, wow, if I think of the 10 years ago where he started to where God has brought him through all of these ups and downs to today. This summer, they're now parents, and their youngest of 2 kids spent 6 weeks in the hospital with E. coli. Just about lost him. In the midst of that incredibly difficult suffering that they went through, not knowing what was going on, they chose to worship Jesus. They chose to step forward and to live very publicly about their faith in Christ. And I stood back and I was just beaming. Not because I wanted them to go through this situation, not because I would have loved to be able to take that away. I was trying to figure out I'm a guy, I want to fix every problem, right? And so it's like, I wanted to take that away from them. And yet I stopped and I looked and I said, boy, look at the witness that they're being right now. And that was 20 years from the time that we started working with them till now. We can have hope because it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. God is going to be doing the work in the lives of our students and the lives of the people probably for far longer than we ever realize. And we have the opportunity now to be a part of that. So let's set that as our mission. That we are going to follow Jesus with everything that we have. And that as we do that, we are going to invest significantly in the generation that's coming up. And we are going to trust that God's going to do what he wants to do in their lives. We're going to be an example. We're going to walk with them. We're going to probably fail, and when we do, we're going to make sure that we apologize and own up to our failures. And then we're going to step forward together with them and invite them into the opportunity to serve together. I want us to be inspired to step forward and to serve our younger generations and to be people who just love Jesus and love the people around us. Let's pray together. Hey, Jesus, I'm so grateful for this congregation and for the young people that are here downstairs in Sunday school, the ones who are here in the service. But I'm so grateful for the grandmas and grandpas and for those of us who are maybe a little younger than the grandmas and grandpas, for the young adults, for the young families. I'm grateful that you have brought us all together and that you have actually invited all of us to be a part of the family of Christ. And God, as we look at how we step out and reach our younger generations, would you remind us that we need to love you first? And then as we do that, we step forward in faith and understanding that we have an opportunity to play a significant role in the faith development of the students who are coming up. Help us to see that as a mission that's not something that we have to begrudgingly hold on to, but an opportunity to be able to step into something fantastic and to lead well. And above all, God, would your name be honored and glorified? Would we live in a way that would point to you? And God, we pray that you would continue to raise up the generation that is coming behind us to be a generation that is able to reach their generation and the generation that's coming after them. God, we trust you to build your church. Would you do it, and would you invite us, and would we be faithful to step into the opportunities that we have? God, we worship you and we give you praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.